everyone, to the December board meeting for Ignite CDA. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you'd all stand and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Time for public comment. Is there any public comment? Bill? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Time for reports. How about parking report from Commissioner Jordan?
Mr. Chairman, let's see. We're working on a breakdown of the profit and loss on each of the individual lots, like I was asked for at the last meeting. Probably have that in January.
Excellent.
And, but there's, like I said before, the accounting system leaves a little to be desired, so we're trying to revamp that a little bit, make it simpler. On the security issues we've had there with some skateboarders and some partying and stuff up there, we closed the top level, and so that solved that, and they're on the next level now.
In the parking garage?
In the parking garage, so we're gonna talk about that at the meeting in January, the parking meeting, try to come up with some ideas for some better security and so forth. Also, I want to give a thank you to Troy. He sent some crews over and they restained the benches and painted the window frames and some things like that.
Oh, nice.
Dressed it up a little bit. That's my speedy report tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordan. Next is the Executive Director's report. Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can invite Mr. Boyd up to kind of give an update on the Atlas project.
Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Chairman Hoffman. If I can, let's see, get to my, maybe Jeff, can you do my, thank you. Thanks.
How's our favorite topic?
It's interesting.
Atlas Mill.
So just a little bit of a written update here and then some pictures I'll show you. Phase one, which is the one where the houses are currently being constructed, that part of the project. There's one more concrete intersection to be completed. That is, weather permits, they'll finish that. The curb work will also be completed this year on Veneer Road because they've got the subgrade blanketed. Excuse me. And then paving in the spring. So that project's marching along. The phase two update, if you've driven by, you've probably noticed that Mount Hink has been leveled. We're processing about 5,000 yards of the material for use as topsoil on our project, or perhaps to sell it in the future. That's a drop in the bucket out there. You know, there's 300,000 yards of material up there. And also to see what kind of rock we can generate out of it. And then the site concrete, asphalt, and rock materials are being crushed for reuse in the project, and I'll show you a picture of that. So this is a before of Mount Hink, one part of Mount Hink, and this is the after. And so it's been lowered by about 15 feet right there. We've pushed a lot of it over the edge. And the majority of what you see here is what we call unsuitable. It's unsuitable structurally. It's got a lot of topsoil organics, but also some rock in it. So you can kind of see the operations happening there. The screen that creates topsoil, you feed the material through it. That's the operation that you see happening up here. This excavator sitting on top, feeding the screen, and the loaders are pushing it into a stockpile for use later.
You know, I saw that the other day when I drove by, and it looked like I could see them grinding up concrete into the east end towards town, or downtown there at the east end. Is that the topsoil, or is that?
So this,
Is that soil, are we winding up with anything that's no good for anything, or is everything good for something?
the things that'll end up that it's no good for anything is the organics in it, like the sticks and the twigs and the chunks of steel. But we can process this material, but so the long-term objective is if we can't find a home for this off-site, which as the board knows, you've asked me to go find a home for this off-site so we can turn this into developable property, will be to start processing that material into topsoil and rock and sell those things to the community over time. But that won't happen in a year's time because there's so much of it there. So that's the option 2. Option 1 is to get the material hauled off-site. The reason for doing this processing is to just take a test run of it to the extent that we can reuse that material in our project. So process enough to kind of figure out what we can do with it if it processes well, what the 2 material characteristics are, and then we'll take the topsoil, reuse it on our project, in the swales and landscaping and whatnot.
So you say you've done about 5,000 yards?
Well, we've done about 2,500 yards right now. There's 2,500 yards more to go.
Have they given you a percentage of dirt to rock? Or?
Not yet, yeah. So those are some of the tests that we're pulling samples of the material. We're also going to test the material for organic content, contaminants, because if we're going to sell it to somebody, we want to be able to tell the person what's in it, or at least know what's in it before we sell it.
Bill, I drove down there yesterday, and I noticed there's a couple of piles down there right by lot 13. Is that from here?
No, well, it is from here, and the board might remember that we processed a bunch of topsoil as part of Phase 0, and it was in the way. And so you paid to process that material. So I didn't want to leave it in the way, and I didn't want to just mix it in. So what Tommy LaRiviere and I talked about was, let's pick it up, move it down to Area 13 where it's easier to get to by the developers, and offer it to them for purchase.
Okay.
And generally just offer it. So LaRiviere is supposed to put a proposal together for the board to consider that says, hey, you guys paid X to make this topsoil. It cost me Y to move it from the top to the bottom, which isn't much. If I sell it for Z, can I keep P and give you Q? So he's working on that. We'll use the entire alphabet.
I saw that this was being developed up there. I wasn't sure if you took some of that down just to.
No, that was the stuff we previously paid for, and I didn't want it to disappear, because you paid for it and it's an asset, and you need to get it paid for it back. I just don't want it to go away. I labeled the slide a pleasant surprise, and it doesn't look, I'll have to explain it to you a little bit. So we're looking east, and this was this gigantic asphalt area. You guys might remember when we've gone for a tour out there, we parked on that area, and then we would go down. And the asphalt, you can see, is about 6 to 8 inches thick. And we had gone out there and dug test holes, and we'd dig a test hole, and you'd get through, 4 or 6 inches of gravel, and then you'd get into some dirt, and then you'd get into some sawdust. Well, LaRiviere started popping off another section of it, and there's about 2.5 feet in some areas of structural soils that we didn't know was here. So all that is going to get scraped up. We're right on the edge of pit 2, so we'll pop the asphalt off. That goes into the crusher, so it goes into this. You can see some of it's staged here with the concrete. And then we'll economically push all this structural rock into pit 2 to fill it up. So we've got a little bit of a savings here as the project moves along. I anticipate we'll find something that isn't a pleasant surprise that might absorb these savings. But I wanted to show the board at least, this was pretty exciting. I drove out there today and I thought, man, this is great.
I remember years ago when they paved that area, for some reason, I don't know if it was EPA rules or something, they paved it, but they paved that big area back over by there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so is the idea, when we push this into the pit, we could get compaction and have developable land?
Pit 2 has always been part of our developable land plan.
Yeah, so that still is?
Yeah, the structural soils to fill pit 2 are originally coming out from the triangle parcel. So we're going to end up, so in earthwork, we're always talking in terms of being short or long, or skinny or fat. And so when you're short with structural material, you don't have enough. We intentionally planned to be fat when we were done with this project by the tune of 75,000 cubic yards of structural soils that we intend to fill pit 3 and potentially pit 4 in, which are underneath this. So, because I don't want to get in a situation where we clear all this stuff out and then we look at each other and say, gee, we have a giant hole in pit 3 and 4. Now we need to go buy material from off-site, because you all wouldn't be happy with that. So we are intentionally long or fat with our material. This may result in us being even longer, which is a positive situation because you can always sell structural material off-site. So we always want to be in a fat or long position. That makes sense? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's expensive to haul that in.
Yeah. So then here's the crushing operation. And so through the negotiations with La Riviere, through lots of back and forth, and we finally concluded on we're paying one lump sum number to them to crush everything on site for a month. So every piece of concrete that happens to be out there. I didn't want the board to be in the risk position of, because you don't know what the concrete looks like when you pull it out of the ground. Is it heavily reinforced? Is it lightly reinforced? Is it a combination of both? And so it kind of puts you in a riskier position. We might be paying a little bit more, but we've eliminated the risk of paying a lot more. Some of it is paid off because La Riviere has run into some concrete that has 1 inch square bar, which that's what tells you how old it is, on 8 inch centers. And if you happen to drive out there or look over there, you see he's had his guys picking through it and busting it out, and they've got it all stockpiled up there. There's some other concrete that he's come across that is unreinforced, that goes through very quickly. So there's a little balance that he's doing there, but you can see it's a good operation. This material here will also end up in pit 2, and it's stockpiled right on the edge of it. So we're just going to push it into the hole when we get to that point. These are just some, this is how fast the world changes, or how technology, but we've been aerial surveying for several years, probably close to 5 years, doing topographic surveys with our drone, and we create models of it. La Riviere has now got the same technology, and so now we can compare our surfaces, so we have many fewer battles over quantities. Because we go check it, and they fly it, and we fly it, and we check it, and our surfaces either match or they don't match, and we can kind of quickly resolve it. These are actually some of their images that came out of their drone. They're a little hard to look at, but here's, this is Suzanne coming in, because they're not perspective views, they're straight down. But you can kind of see the amount of work that's going on there. This is a picture down in the crusher. So Celtice Way is right here, and you can see the operation. He's feeding here, and the stockpile is there. This is the picture of the screen, and again, you can kind of see this is the 3 materials that you get off of it: topsoil, reject, and rock. And this is the prairie trail down here. You can see how far we had to push Mount Hink out to the very edge of the prairie trail in order to get a flat spot. The primary reason we shoved that out was to create a stockpile area in a big flat spot, because we don't know how long you guys are going to be in the soil cells business. It might be 4 or 5 years, it might be 9 months. But we needed a place to keep our stuff organized, so if it was the long haul, we could efficiently sell materials. And that's just another picture of the looking down on it. There's a massive, I counted 25 pieces of equipment out there today, so they're just going nuts and getting after it. And this is just another interesting view of it. This is the prairie trail here, Celtice Way over here. Kind of gives you an idea of the electronic data that we're using to make sure we're tracking quantities. Because when you have that many pieces of equipment, you can spend money super, super fast, unintentionally. And so we're monitoring it very closely. So you guys have a memo on this, and it kind of came up when one of my discussions. I was talking with Tony about it, and I don't know if you want to do a lead-in anymore on it.
So I asked Phil to bring this issue forward to the board for discussion this afternoon. As you recall, when the design for the Atlas project started several years ago, this retaining wall project element was designed to meet the needs of the project in the most cost-effective manner, since we did not know how the project was going to perform on the open market. Since that time, we have seen aggressive pricing on land sales, which now allows us to consider project enhancements, such as upgrading the retaining wall from a boulder element to a vertiblock element. So we thought it'd be prudent, I thought it'd be prudent to ask Phil to come here today to give you the opportunity to discuss that. If you're willing to consider an upgrade to the project at a cost of, I think, $175,000, or continue forward with the originally planned boulder wall. So it's one of these opportunities that have come along since the project has done very well. The resources are there if the board would want to choose to enhance this project element. So with that, I'll turn it back to Phil and he can kind of go through it.
And part of the struggle we've had a little bit, because it is one of those things, is, do you put the real hardwood floors in, or do you put the, the LVT in, luxury vinyl tile in? Both of them accomplish the same thing, but one of them has different characteristics to it. And so it really just generally fell out of a discussion that Tony and I were having. And so you guys have seen what the boulder walls look like. There are some general challenges with these, because you can imagine that Mrs. Jones lives down here and Mrs. Smith lives up here. And it's unlikely that people are going to mess with these walls, but you can mess with them a little bit, because they don't have a great interlocking quality to them. And there's also some things, you get stuff growing out of them because weeds get captured in them and whatnot. So maybe they're not as great looking as you'd like them to be. The wall is primarily in the backyard of these 12 homes, but there's also a big stretch of it that runs here along Veneer Road. And the board might recall that the reason that this was put in here was to make these, we've labeled them luxury lots, maybe that's not the right term, but they look over everything else, was to allow us to create a flat pad up here for the driveway and then have a daylight basement out the bottom of them. Without that, the lots would have been extremely steep, and you wouldn't have been able to have a driveway in there. So that's why we put this retaining wall in here. And when it gets regraded, we'll have that same thing for over here, because we're borrowing all of this material to end up in pit 1 and pit 2. So as Tony said, when we did the financial feasibility study in 2017-18, the thing was, we had to make sure it worked so you could justify creating the district there. So we were using the lowest cost scenarios on walls, because we knew there was going to be quite a few retaining walls. So we used a boulder wall. Well, I've just been advancing the boulder wall forward. Then I started thinking, and I told Tony this, do you guys want a boulder wall? Because, that's your guys' decision to make. So that's when he said, let's advance it forward to the board. This is what a verti-block wall looks like. You guys have probably seen this. They're just a little more tidier. They're more expensive to build, $175,000. But if you had to go in and pull a chunk out of there, it's easier to do that. Does it generate higher land sales? You got me. We asked Heartland, because they're in that world, and they certainly said, gosh, it looks nicer. But could you quantify that it actually generated a higher land sale? I think that would be difficult to do. So anyway, that's essentially the gist of the presentation.
So is there any structural, I think the first slide showed some nuisance things around landscaping, but is there a structural risk to using, because aesthetically, I don't really care. That's my personal view, but I'd rather see us use funds that are unanticipated based on the success of the project for things that are truly for the public good.
Yep.
I'm in
like
agreement
park
there.
enhancements.
Yeah.
And also, I worry about us making additional investments that really should, I think, be for the homeowners. So Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Smith are going to pay fees to a homeowners association to do maintenance and preventive maintenance.
Yep.
So and we're not done with the project, so there's always these things about the water pump and so I'd rather have us invest our funds in things that help the project move and advance in a successful way for everyone, or that are for the public good, like park enhancements or something, but.
Yeah, so for the structural question, both of them are an engineered wall. This wall would be engineered by the contractor's engineer, his geotechnical engineer. The science behind designing boulder walls is not as high and tight as the science behind these walls, because these walls are designed by the manufacturer's engineers. So there's a little more science and analysis behind these walls than this one. So they both will accomplish the same thing. If you ask me the question, which one is slightly more riskier, it would be the boulder wall compared to this wall. But there's still factors of safety that the engineers put in. The reality of it is either wall that goes in there, they're not going to be touched for, certainly in our lifetimes, unless something catastrophic, happens, an earthquake happens, and but they're designed for those as well. So that's about the extent of the structural difference between the two.
Mr. English.
Well, just my 2 cents, I like the boulder wall better. I guess if I were just looking at, looks like that's more natural. I thought it would cost more. As far as if Mrs. Smith wants to, if some vines grew out and she can put a little miniature flower pot, good for her or something. So in terms of upfront, I prefer this, and if it happens to cost less, that's good. And we're not as I read the analysis, it's like, well, you spend, more upfront to save something later. But as I understand, we're not planning to be there later. So, it seems like on all counts, that one, I appreciate bringing it forward for the, decision point discussion, but I would still say hang in with that for my 2 cents. So.
I appreciate you bringing it to us and asking us, so we have the option. And from my standpoint, feel free to do that anytime as we go through this project, because it's nice to have some options. And
you guys recall the same discussion we had about landscaping, a year ago, where we had super elaborate landscaping, bare bones landscaping. We brought the board the analysis, and the board ended up saying, let's take us right here, kind of in the middle. And that's the direction we've had. This is in the same vein as that, at the end of the day, you guys are the developer, and it shouldn't be Tony and I making these decisions. It should be you guys. And that's why we're, as Commissioner Jordan said, we bring these things forward. If it has to do with the thickness of base rock, you probably don't care so much, because that's really a science engineering driven thing. But something like this does have some intangibles that are value judgments that you guys should be making, not me or Tony.
well, I appreciate that. And, I've seen a lot of boulder walls around the area. And I don't think I've ever seen a boulder wall come down anywhere and fail. I think I have seen a couple of, landscape retaining walls start to shift and fail a little bit. The only thing I would say on that, I've seen a lot of different rock walls around the area, boulder walls, but some of them are really good looking, and some of them, they take these giant white rocks that look like dinosaur eggs or something, and they almost don't look natural or something. And so, and this is just my personal thing, I would just say, I personally would like to see some rocks that have some, color blending in them, and, and kind of blend with the land a little bit, not some of these humongous white dinosaur egg ones that get dug up out of the aquifer.
And therein lies the
Those are
challenge
sort of
with these.
so-so there.
Yeah, well, so the challenge with these walls is we're going to get, especially in the sections of wall that are 12 to 14 feet tall, we're going to have gigantic dinosaur, because
course.
that's what the design will call for. And they're all going to be kind of the typical salt and pepper rock that you see out of the prairie with very little color variation in them, because that's what's available. And we were shooting for the least expensive option.
Yeah,
And so we intentionally did not specify something different. Now, if the board were to say, well, gosh, is there something in between this and the Verde block, we could go back and look at, you guys might have heard of Montana stone. That is a nice looking rock. We could pursue some other options, but right now I went for the least expensive option, and you don't get much of a choice when you're going for the least expensive option.
well, and I guess that's what that is there.
Yes, other than the rocks down here, this wall is probably 8 feet high, 9 feet high, and we're gonna have some sections that are 14 feet high.
Well, Phil,
Based upon that, is there a difference in the width, or I guess the width of the wall versus the engineered wall?
Yes, so this,
So are we losing buildable space by using a boulder wall versus a
we,
engineered wall?
we are.
How much are we losing?
Probably 2 or 3 feet. So it's not a tremendous amount, but I'm trying to figure out how to give you the Reader's Digest version. The area of influence that the boulder wall takes up is further than the area of influence that this wall. So if you just envision from this line, I'll kind of make a numbers up here. The VertiBlock mall, the area of influence that is in the failure plane might go back 7 or 8 feet. On this other one, we'll go back 10 or 12 feet, or 14 feet, way back up into here. We don't care too much because the houses will all be limited to being built up here. This will be the backyards. We'll end up doing some things on the plat that restricts what a homeowner can do in those areas of influence, because we don't want them to go in there and dig into that area and put fountains in there that might leak and oversaturate the material behind it. So there's a little bit more site management associated with this one and site control that the homeowners association will have. We can deal with that because we'll put it on the plat, it will be recorded, but as you guys know, people get their title report, throw it into the drawer, and then they're building a fountain in their backyard. The homeowners association eventually sees it and goes out there and says, wait a second, you can't do that there. So there's some of that, Commissioner Arman, that's the difference between the two.
That was one of my concerns, was the width of the wall. I mean, I actually drove out there yesterday just to kind of drive around because I wanted to look at the wall that we built down on the river.
Yep.
'Cause that's obviously a boulder wall.
Yep.
And then I'm kind of the opposite. I like the structured wall, that wall better, mainly because it is engineered better. It's less depth, and that's what I was looking at. And I guess the other reason is because I feel like down on the river, we use the natural look. We're getting back up here, we're getting more into more of an urban area versus a natural area. So I just thought that looked better. I mean, I guess if I was gonna make a choice, I'd probably go this way versus the natural wall. I guess one question I have, I mean, we have been getting some lot sales that have been coming in, above, and we've seen the finances on those. What is the status right now of DeChase's bid? Are they going through with that? Or is that?
Yes, so it's a little bit off the site, off here.
I
but-
know we've been kind of delaying, and that's a large bid, so I'm just curious.
Yeah,
I can handle that one. We are scheduled to sign documents on Friday,
Perfect. This Friday.
this Friday.
Perfect. Because we've given them extension after extension. I thought if that now is starting to fall apart, that might be a little different realm as far as having to look at the finances of this. Good, thank you.
I just want to say that I'm really pleased that we do have surplus funds. It's great news. And I'm probably more in line to lean with Commissioner Mandel about using those funds for public improvement, for the park. The other wall, the boulder wall, to me is much more aesthetically pleasing. It looks natural. It looks like it's intended to be there. The other wall to me is cold, callous. It's just, again, my personal feeling. But again, I would like to see those funds used elsewhere. I think there's a lot better demand elsewhere for those funds than improvement of this wall.
and I think those are the kind of the value judgments that only you guys can.
True, and
make.
I remember when we lost some of the amenities in the park because we were running a tight budget in the
Yep.
beginning. I'd like to see some of those come back if we could.
I like the engineered wall, but when I first read this email though and looked at this, I just thought, well, if this was a private development that I was involved in, I'd be saving the $175,000 because I don't think it'll affect the lot sales at all, and I've never seen a boulder wall fail around here. It'd be pretty tough for one of those to fail.
Just a point of clarification on where funds can be used. Remember, we have district boundaries. So
Right.
these funds, wouldn't be able to be displaced and used in the Lake District on the park because they're kind of in a different district.
River
any
District, right.
savings would be-
So what happens to those funds then?
Well, they would just be used within that project area within the district, and if they're not spent, we would roll them into, the next phases of construction, so.
Don't we have a park though in the River District?
No.
Nothing at all, no green space.
Park is in the Lake District.
Right, the park, but there's no other green space in the river district.
In the River District, there is, over in Riverstone, the Park and Pond
Okay, I
area over in
understand.
Riverstone.
Okay. I was just, okay.
And this is,
This is actually the Atlas District there, though.
and so in the Atlas District, Commissioner Chapkus, if this area stays a unsuitable area and we never develop it, that was intended to turn into a green space at some point, and funds could be put into that space.
Understood.
Yeah.
And you, Commissioner Mandel, you were referring, when you said park, what were you referring to?
Well, no, that's a good clarification. I think it's just holding on to the contingency for the
The
like,
unknowns?
super unsexy things that might happen, because we're not done with this, or things that if Mount Hank is not suitable and we need to do something else for public good. So I guess $175,000, I think, could be appropriated to something that is, the public might benefit from more. And I don't know what that is now. I don't have anything specific in mind. I just feel like a retaining wall is, if there's not a really important functional purpose to that upgrade, I don't know. When you drive a Toyota, you could drive a BMW, but Toyota's pretty good, right? So, I don't know. I mean, that's my opinion. I'd rather sit on those for unanticipated costs that we might confront later, or something that is really for the public benefit.
Or at least something that would be visible to the public, because
Well,
they're not going to care about the wall. But if we have a few, at Mount Hankin, originally we're going to have the the mountain trails or whatever, now it's flat.
Yeah.
But I mean, some kind of, if it's going to end up, and if it's not really buildable, then I mean, some kind of playfields or something eventually, I guess, would go there, so,
Yeah, we don't have to know where to spend the money
yeah.
No.
right now.
Nice
We
to
just-
have a pot, yeah.
We just need, there's just no use wasting money, so, and I think we're all in agreement on that, so.
Are there any comments
There'll be
from the
someplace.
commissioners that have called in?
Mr. Chairman, Steve Widmeyer here.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to weigh in is that I'm on the side of sticking with the boulder wall in looking at it. I just don't see the value of the additional $175,000. And I agree with Commissioner Mandel that, we probably should put that away for maybe some future costs. So that's kind of where I sit on it.
Thanks. Did Olivia dial in?
Yes, I did. This is Olivia. I originally, when I was looking at the email, I thought of structural soundness. And so, but I think, Phil, you kind of answered that question. So I'm good with whatever the board kind of decides. I think everybody has some rationale behind it.
Thank you.
Do we need a vote?
Well, you probably need a vote if you want to move forward with the vertiblock wall.
If you just want to confirm it with a motion, just go moving forward with whatever you choose to do.
I move we keep it at a boulder wall.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That's all I had.
Thanks for your
Other
input.
questions?
Different, I like the other one.
Motion carries to continue with the boulder wall.
Okay, that's it I
Thanks,
have.
Bill.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just don't let it fall, Phil.
So when will that start construction? How soon do you think you'll start to start doing the landscaping out there? Or not landscaping, moving that dirt off the triangle piece?
It's probably not going to be until sometime in, I would anticipate February, maybe even a little later than that. Because right now we're so focused on that, getting the sawdust out of pit 2. And then once that's accomplished, we start filling that in, then we start borrowing from that site. So we still have to finish all the borrow work. And then once the borrow work, you'll start to see that shape come in, and then we'll start building the boulder, Riviera will start building the boulder wall.
So is that when the trees will start to come out? 'Cause I know
There's a
some of the
bunch
trees-
of them that have come out so far. And I will pass on to the board just in case you wonder. We worked really hard to go back through there and figure out if there was opportunities to save trees. But there was a combination of trees that were dead that maybe we could have saved. There were trees that were blown over. The tops were blown out of them. We couldn't save those. And there was trees that we just really couldn't save because there was so much cut or fill around them. But when you go through there now, you'll still see some stragglers sitting there that we intend to girdle, so you actually fill around them. And we're going to see how much we can get away with just barely filling around them. Then we'll assess, do we think it's going to die? And is it an area that it's going to die and create a liability for either the city or the Ignite? But maybe I'm overly sensitive about it. I was just trying to work really hard to not remove them. One of the things I will come back to you with in the future is once we get that site laid in there, reforestation is probably too big of a word, but heavily planting that slope outside of the public right-of-way. And that'll be another one of the things for the board to consider, where I'm going to come here and say, hey, would the board like to spend $85,000, and I don't know what the number is, reforesting that hillside and restricting what can happen with the trees in that area. But what I first wanted to do is get the site cleared. You guys can look at it and make those, again, they're just value judgments, because how much value does a tree have? To some people, it's a lot. To a developer who might just say, I don't care. I'm not going to be able to sell the lots for anymore, so I don't care. You guys are a little bit unique, though, because you have a foot in both worlds. And so that's why I want to keep bringing these things forward and letting you, the board, make those value judgments.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay? All right, thank you.
Let's see, one quick other question, as long as we're talking about options and and things we've spent money on, the like entryway monuments,
Yep.
kind of what's the timeline or?
Those will also be after the first of the year, because they're right in our current work zone. So the pictures that I showed, like where that crusher was, that's right where one of the monuments goes. And so LaRiviere is actually working on building those monuments, the parts and pieces that the steel parts and pieces are being manufactured. They are having some supply chain issues with a couple of them. There's not a lot of supply chain issue elements because it's pretty fundamental, concrete, steel stuff. But there were a few parts and pieces that they're having a little bit of struggle with. But it won't be till after the first of the year that you'll see those come out of the ground, because we need our site tidied up and Mount Hink out of the way. We'll first start on the one at Atlas, because it's the premier corner, at the roundabout there. So that'll be the first one. They'll move down to Suzanne and build those. And then the last one they'll build is up where the crusher was. So you'll see
So
that.
Phil, Atlas is open now.
It's open for construction access.
Well, the people can drive in there. Have you had any problems with people coming in?
Yes.
Okay, I figured as much.
Yeah. And it's a real challenge, because Atlas Building Group has enjoyed, the contractor that's down there now, they have enjoyed kind of, a closed site,
Yeah.
which is great for them. And, you're happy to do that. But now LaRiviere needed to close their site just because of the pictures I showed. There's massive operations going, so you can't have anybody moving through that site because there's so much equipment happening there, and it's just too dangerous. So they had to close their site. So we work with the city to open up the fire loop for, so the fire department, the city, because they're a good partner with you guys, is plowing the roads. LaRiviere set up all the traffic control. The city's going to monitor it to make sure it doesn't get moved. And so it's not open to the public. It's open for construction access only, and it's signed that way. So hopefully people will respect that.
So we talked one time a while back about having security there. Is that still something we're looking at as time moves forward?
A site manager or something?
The site manager we've talked about, when we looked at it before, the number was pretty big, and I think the board said, geez, let's rethink that a little bit. We have had quite a challenge, honestly, on phase one with Atlas Building Group. They're rushing, and they're subcontractors, and they're trying to get their stuff done, and you can understand why they move the traffic control out of the way. But when they move the traffic control out of the way, it opens the entire site to everybody. And so we're trying to manage that. As soon as we get into the next phase and we have another contractor on site, I think we'll seriously need to have the site manager underway, because it just becomes too challenging. like I said, the city's been a great partner. Atlas Building Group's been pretty cooperative up at the upper levels, but when you get to a fourth tier subcontractor who doesn't get the message, he just goes out there and moves the traffic control out of the way and drives his truck in there and goes home for the weekend. And next thing we know, we got people down there having parties and bonfires. And La Riviere is out there, and La Riviere has been very good about not passing on those additional expenses to the board. But today, Tommy said he's had his fill of it, because he's been constantly going out there putting the traffic control back every single day, and that's a pretty big expense for him that he's not asked to pass on to the board, or to Ignite, so.
That's why I asked about security.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure now that it's open that we're gonna start needing to have something there to monitor that.
I think it's the site manager idea, where we just have somebody dedicated to managing traffic control, being able to go track down the subcontractor who moved the traffic control, explain to them why it can't be moved, ask for their compliance. If there's no compliance, then it could get bucked to the city, because the city is the one that has the teeth with the builders. We might build in some more teeth with subsequent builders than we currently have with the Atlas Building Group.
Yeah, it's only fair. If we need an enforcer down there to make the project finish up,
Yeah,
that's what we gotta do.
maybe that's what we'll call it, is the enforcer. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Phil. Next up is board commissioner comments.
I just want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, and it's a pleasure working with you.
Thanks, Jim.
Yes.
Same to you.
Likewise.
Yep, Merry Christmas.
And then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries, and Jeff, that's a wrap.
Nobody's opposed.
I opposed.